Welcome to Viking Valhalla Stories. If you're ready to dive into the harsh, unforgiving world of the Norse warriors, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit that like button to support more incredible Viking stories. Drop a comment below telling us where in the world you're watching from. We love hearing from our Viking warriors across the globe. Now, settle in for an epic journey to the frozen lands of the north. The bitter winds of Skjoldland carved through Bjorn Ironwill's weathered cloak as he trudged through the knee-deep snow, each step a reminder of his disgrace. 3 moons had passed since Jarl Ragnar the Cruel had stripped him of his place among the Bloodaxe clan, casting him into the wilderness like a mangy cur. The exile's breath formed crystalline clouds in the frigid air, his frost-covered beard crackling with each labored exhale. Behind him stretched an endless expanse of white, broken only by the skeletal remains of ancient pines that had succumbed to the perpetual winter. Ahead lay uncertainty, perhaps death, perhaps redemption. Bjorn cared little which would claim him first. The shame of his banishment burned hotter than any forge fire, a constant ache that no amount of mead could drown. The sun, pale and distant as a dying ember, cast long shadows across the frozen landscape. Bjorn's stomach gnawed at itself with hunger, having consumed the last of his dried fish 2 days prior. His leather boots, worn thin from countless raids across the northern seas, provided little protection against the merciless cold that crept through the cracks like invisible serpents. As he crested a ridge overlooking a narrow valley, Bjorn's weathered hands tightened around the handle of his battle-axe, Skull Splitter. The weapon had drunk deep of Saxon blood in the raids of his youth, when his name was spoken with reverence in the great halls of his people. Now it served merely as a walking stick for a broken man whose honor lay shattered like ice beneath a warhorse's hooves. The valley below offered little promise. A frozen stream wound through barren rock formations, while sparse clusters of stunted birch trees provided the only hint of life in the desolate expanse. Yet something compelled Bjorn forward, perhaps the warrior's instinct that had kept him alive through 30 winters of battle and bloodshed. As he descended into the valley, the wind's howling intensified, carrying with it an otherworldly sound that made the exile's scarred hands pause mid-step. It was not the cry of wolf or bear, nor the shriek of hunting hawk. This sound spoke of something ancient, something that predated even the oldest sagas sung by the Skalds. The noise grew stronger as Bjorn approached a cluster of ice-covered boulders near the valley's heart. His breath caught in his throat as he rounded the largest stone formation. For there, trapped beneath a fallen tree trunk thick as a ship's mast, lay a creature from the tales of old. The dragon hatchling was no larger than a hunting hound, its scales the color of polished obsidian, shot through with veins of deep crimson. One wing was pinned beneath the massive trunk, while the other fluttered weakly in the snow. The creature's golden eyes, large as coins from the Byzantine merchants, fixed upon Bjorn with an intelligence that sent chills racing down his spine. "By Thor's hammer," Bjorn whispered, his voice barely audible above the wind. "The old stories speak true." The hatchling's breathing came in rapid, shallow pants, small puffs of steam rising from its nostrils. Dark blood stained the snow beneath its trapped wing, and Bjorn could see the wing membrane was torn in several places. The creature's distress was evident in every labored breath, every desperate attempt to free itself from the prison of wood and ice. For long moments, exile and dragonling regarded each other across the expanse of snow. Bjorn's mind raced with the implications of his discovery. Dragons were creatures of legend, spoken of in hushed tones around winter fires. Some said they were the children of Jormungandr, the world serpent. Others claimed they were Loki's spawn, agents of chaos and destruction. All agreed they were beings of immense power, creatures to be feared and respected in equal measure. Yet this small being appeared more vulnerable than any creature Bjorn had encountered in his years of wandering. The hatchling's eyes held a depth of pain that resonated with something deep within the exile's chest. a recognition of suffering, of abandonment, of being cast aside by one's own kind. "Your kin have left you, haven't they, little one?" Bjorn murmured, taking a cautious step closer. "Just as mine have cast me out." The dragon's head tilted slightly at the sound of his voice, though whether from curiosity or wariness, Bjorn could not tell. The creature's breathing had grown more labored, and the exile realized that without intervention, the hatchling would not survive the approaching night. The temperature would drop further once the weak sun disappeared behind the mountains, and even a creature of legend could not withstand the killing cold while trapped and injured. Bjorn set down his pack and approached the fallen tree with the measured steps of a hunter stalking prey. The trunk was massive, easily the weight of 3 grown men, but the exile had not survived 3 decades of warfare by accepting defeat easily. He examined the point where the tree had fallen, noting how it had caught on a protruding rock formation that prevented it from settling fully to the ground. "Hold still, small dragon," Bjorn said, positioning himself at the tree's thickest point. "This will hurt, but it's your only chance for freedom." The exile braced his legs wide and gripped the trunk with both hands, feeling the rough bark bite into his palms through his leather gloves. With a grunt of effort that echoed across the valley, Bjorn lifted. His muscles strained against the tremendous weight, tendons standing out like bowstrings along his neck and arms. The tree budged slightly, rising perhaps the width of a finger, before settling back into place. Sweat beaded on Bjorn's forehead, despite the freezing air. He adjusted his grip and tried again, this time focusing all his strength on a single, explosive movement. The trunk rose higher this time, enough for the hatchling to pull its injured wing partially free before Bjorn's strength gave out and the tree crashed back down. The dragon let out a sound that was part whimper, part growl, its golden eyes now fixed on Bjorn with something approaching trust. The exile noticed that the creature had managed to pull most of its wing clear, though the tip remained pinned beneath the massive timber. "One more time," Bjorn panted, his breath coming in great clouds. "One more, and you'll be free." He repositioned himself once more, this time wedging his shoulder beneath the trunk while gripping it with both hands. Every muscle in his body protested as he began the lift, his vision blurring from the effort. The tree rose slowly, inch by agonizing inch, until the hatchling was able to pull its wing completely free. The moment the dragon was clear, Bjorn released his grip and stumbled backward, falling heavily into the snow. His chest heaved as he struggled to catch his breath, steam rising from his overheated body in the frigid air. When he finally looked up, he found the hatchling standing on unsteady legs, its injured wing held carefully against its side. For several heartbeats, neither moved. Then, to Bjorn's amazement, the small dragon approached him with hesitant steps, its golden eyes never leaving his face. When it reached the fallen exile, the creature lowered its obsidian head and gently touched its snout to Bjorn's outstretched hand. The contact sent warmth racing up Bjorn's arm, not merely the physical warmth of the creature's breath, but something deeper. A connection that seemed to bypass his mind and speak directly to his soul. In that moment, he understood that he was no longer alone in his exile. The fates had brought them together, 2 outcasts in a world that had no place for them. "What do I call you, little one?" Bjorn asked, his voice soft with wonder. The dragon tilted its head, as if considering the question, then let out a soft trill that sounded almost like music. "Ember," Bjorn decided, "for the fire that burns within you, even in this frozen waste." As if in response to its naming, Ember's scales seemed to shimmer more brightly, the crimson veins pulsing with an inner light. The hatchling moved closer to Bjorn, pressing its warm flank against the exile's side, and for the first time in 3 moons, Bjorn felt something other than despair. The sun was setting behind the mountain peaks, painting the snow-covered landscape in shades of gold and crimson. Bjorn knew they needed shelter for the night, someplace where Ember could rest and recover from its injuries. He struggled to his feet, his muscles still aching from the effort of lifting the tree, and shouldered his pack. "Come, Ember," he said, extending his hand toward the hatchling. We'll find somewhere safe to spend the night." The dragon limped alongside him as they made their way deeper into the valley, Ember's injured wing dragging slightly in the snow despite its efforts to keep it elevated. Bjorn matched his pace to the creatures, his experienced eyes scanning the landscape for any sign of shelter. As darkness began to settle over the land like a funeral shroud, they discovered a shallow cave carved into the valley's rocky wall. It was barely large enough for both of them, but it would provide protection from the wind and snow. Bjorn gathered what dry wood he could find and built a small fire near the cave's entrance, the flickering flames casting dancing shadows on the stone walls. Ember curled up beside the fire, its scales reflecting the orange light like polished metal. The warmth seemed to ease the dragon's pain, and its breathing became deeper and more regular. Bjorn settled against the cave wall, his axe within easy reach, and watched over his unlikely companion. "Tomorrow we'll need to find food," he murmured, more to himself than to Ember. "And perhaps some way to tend that wing of yours." The hatchling's eyes opened at the sound of his voice, regarding him with that same unsettling intelligence. Then, to Bjorn's surprise, Ember began to purr, a deep, rumbling sound that seemed to emanate from its chest. The vibration was oddly soothing, and despite his circumstances, Bjorn found his eyelids growing heavy. As sleep claimed him, the exile's last conscious thought was of the warmth pressing against his side and the steady rhythm of Ember's breathing. For the first time since his banishment, Bjorn Ironwill slept without dreams of shame and failure. Instead, his mind filled with images of soaring through endless skies, borne aloft by wings of shadow and flame. The pale light of dawn, filtering through the cave entrance, stirred Bjorn from the deepest sleep he had known in months. The exile's body ached from sleeping on the hard stone, but the warmth pressed against his side reminded him that the previous day's encounter had been no fever dream. Ember lay curled beside him, the hatchling's obsidian scales rising and falling with each peaceful breath. Bjorn moved carefully, not wanting to disturb his companion's rest, and stepped outside to assess their situation. The morning air bit at his exposed skin, but the wind had died during the night, leaving the valley wrapped in an eerie stillness. Fresh snow had fallen, covering their tracks and creating a pristine blanket that sparkled like crushed diamonds in the weak sunlight. His stomach reminded him forcefully of their need for sustenance. The exile's experienced eyes scanned the landscape, noting the signs that spoke of life hidden beneath the winter's grip. There, the delicate tracks of snow hares crossing the valley floor, and beyond them, the larger prints of what might be deer or elk moving toward the frozen stream. A soft trill from behind him announced Ember's awakening. Bjorn turned to find the hatchling standing at the cave entrance, its golden eyes alert and curious. The injured wing was held more naturally now, though Bjorn could see it still caused discomfort when the dragon moved. "Good morning, little flame," Bjorn said softly, noting how Ember's head tilted at the sound of his voice. "Are you hungry? I know I am." The dragon's response was unmistakable, a low rumble that Bjorn interpreted as agreement. But as he reached for his hunting spear, a sound carried across the valley that froze the blood in his veins. The distant braying of hunting horns, accompanied by the baying of hounds, echoed from the ridge he had descended the previous day. "Hunters," Bjorn muttered, his weathered hands automatically checking his weapons. Or worse. His fears were confirmed moments later when he spotted the first of the pursuing party cresting the ridge. Even at this distance, he could make out the distinctive red and black shields of the Bloodaxe clan, his former kinsman, led by what appeared to be Jarl Ragnar himself, his massive frame unmistakable even across the expanse of snow. "They've followed my trail," Bjorn realized with growing dread. "But why? My exile was meant to be final." The answer came with the arrival of more warriors, their weapons glinting in the morning light. This was no ordinary hunting party. It was a war band, armed for battle and moving with the purposeful stride of men intent on killing. Bjorn's exile had not satisfied Ragnar's thirst for vengeance. The Jarl wanted blood. Ember seemed to sense the danger, pressing close to Bjorn's leg while emitting a low, warning growl. The hatchling's scales had darkened, the crimson veins pulsing with an inner fire that spoke of awakening power. Despite its small size and injured state, the dragon's instincts recognized the approaching threat. "We cannot outrun them," Bjorn said, his tactical mind already assessing their options. "Not with your wings still healing, and not in this terrain." The warband was descending into the valley now, their progress slowed by the deep snow, but their intent unmistakable. Bjorn counted at least a dozen warriors, all armed with the finest weapons and armor his former clan could provide. Against such numbers, even an uninjured warrior would have little chance of survival. A flicker of movement caught his eye, and Bjorn's heart lurched as he spotted the hunter's hounds ranging ahead of the main group. The massive war dogs, bred for tracking and killing, would reach the cave long before their masters. Their keen noses would find the scent trail despite the fresh snow, and once they did, there would be no hiding. "Ember," Bjorn said urgently, dropping to one knee beside the hatchling. "You must fly. Your wing may be injured, but perhaps you can still—" The dragon's response cut him short. A firm shake of its obsidian head, followed by a deliberate step closer to Bjorn's side. The message was clear. Ember would not abandon the exile who had saved its life, regardless of the cost. "Loyal to a fault," Bjorn murmured, a bitter smile crossing his scarred features. "Just like me, once upon a time." The baying of the hounds grew louder, closer. Bjorn could see them now, great grey beasts with foam-flecked jaws racing across the snow toward their hiding place. Behind them came the warriors of the Bloodaxe clan, their battle cries echoing off the valley walls as they closed in for the kill. Bjorn hefted Skullsplitter, feeling the familiar weight of the weapon that had served him faithfully through countless battles. If this was to be his final stand, he would meet it as a true son of the North, with steel in his hand and defiance in his heart. "Stay behind me, little one," he commanded Ember, stepping out from the cave's protection. "I'll buy you what time I can." The first of the hounds reached them with slavering jaws and eyes mad with bloodlust. Bjorn's axe swept in a deadly arc, the keen edge biting deep into the beast's skull and dropping it instantly. The second dog leaped for his throat, but the exile was ready, catching it on his shield's rim and hurling it aside with bone-crushing force. But there were too many of them. As Bjorn battled the pack, more hounds arrived, circling him like wolves around a wounded stag. He felt teeth tear through his leather leggings, drawing blood from his calf. Then another dog fastened onto his shield arm with crushing jaws. It was then that Ember entered the battle. The hatchling's scream of rage split the morning air like the crack of thunder, a sound that spoke of ancient power awakening. The crimson veins in its scales blazed with sudden fire, and when Ember opened its mouth, a gout of flame erupted forth, small by dragon standards perhaps, but more than sufficient to engulf the hound, attacking Bjorn's arm. The beast released its grip with a howl of agony, its fur ablaze as it rolled desperately in the snow. The other hounds backed away from this new threat, whimpering and uncertain. They had been bred to hunt men and beasts, not creatures of legend and flame. Bjorn stared in amazement at his small companion, who stood protectively beside him, with smoke still curling from its nostrils. "I knew you had fire in you, little Ember," he breathed, "but I never imagined." The warriors of the Bloodaxe clan had witnessed the display as well, and their advance had faltered. Bjorn could see uncertainty in their ranks, hear the murmur of voices raised in fear and confusion. Dragons were creatures of myth and legend. To face one in battle was to court not just death, but damnation. Only Jarl Ragnar seemed unaffected by the supernatural display. The massive warrior strode forward through the snow, his great sword, Heartripper, gleaming in his hand, his scarred face twisted with hatred and avarice. "Bjorn Iron Will!" Ragnar's voice boomed across the valley. "Still playing with pets, I see, but this changes nothing. You stole from me, and now you'll pay with your life and that of your unnatural companion." "I stole nothing!" Bjorn shouted back, raising his axe in challenge. "The accusations were false, and you know it. False or true, it matters not, Ragnar replied, his smile cruel as a winter storm. What matters is that you question my judgment before the entire clan. For that alone, you deserve death. The Jarl's words confirmed what Bjorn had long suspected. His exile had never been about the supposed theft of gold from Ragnar's personal hoard. It had been about power, about eliminating a warrior whose honor and skill had begun to overshadow that of his leader. Ember pressed closer to Bjorn's leg, the dragon's body temperature rising as its protective instincts flared. The hatchling might be small and injured, but it was still a creature of legend, and its loyalty to the exile who had saved its life burned as fiercely as the flames in its breast. "Come then, Ragnar the Craven," Bjorn called out, using the most insulting epithet he could devise. "Face me yourself, if you dare, or do you need your pack of dogs and cowards to bring down one exiled warrior?" The insult struck home, as Bjorn had intended. Ragnar's face purpled with rage, and he gestured sharply to his warriors. "Hold back! This cur is mine to kill!" The Jarl advanced through the snow, his massive frame casting a long shadow in the morning light. He was larger than Bjorn, stronger, and his equipment was superior, mail shirt gleaming, helmet polished, weapons keen and well-maintained. Against such odds, the exile's chances were slim indeed. But Bjorn had advantages of his own, experience gained through 3 decades of warfare, the desperate strength of a man with nothing left to lose, and beside him, a creature whose very presence spoke of forces beyond mortal understanding. The two warriors circled each other in the snow, weapons at the ready, while their breath formed clouds in the frigid air. Around them the morning light caught and reflected off the pristine white landscape, creating a natural arena for their deadly dance. Ragnar struck first, his great sword cleaving through the air with enough force to split a shield in 2. Bjorn barely managed to deflect the blow with his axe, the impact jarring his arms to the shoulder. The Jarl followed up immediately with a shield bash that sent the exile stumbling backward, fighting to maintain his balance in the treacherous snow. "You were always too slow, Bjorn," Ragnar taunted, pressing his attack. "Too careful, too thoughtful. A true warrior acts on instinct alone." The great sword came again, this time in a horizontal sweep aimed at Bjorn's midsection. The exile dropped into a crouch, feeling the blade whistle overhead, and lashed out with his axe at Ragnar's exposed leg. The Jarl twisted aside, but not quickly enough. Skullsplitter's edge tore through mail and leather, drawing a line of crimson across his thigh. Ragnar roared in pain and fury, redoubling his assault. Blow after blow rained down on Bjorn's defenses, each impact driving him further back toward the rocky wall of the valley. The exile's strength was beginning to flag. The effort of the previous day, combined with poor nutrition and the bitter cold, had taken their toll. It was then that disaster struck. Bjorn's foot caught on a hidden stone beneath the snow, and he went down hard, his axe flying from numbed fingers. Ragnar loomed over him like an avatar of death, his great sword raised for the killing blow. "Die, knowing that your precious dragon will follow you to hell," the Jarl snarled. The blade descended in a silver arc, and time seemed to slow. Bjorn watched his death approach, with the strange detachment of a warrior who had always known this moment would come. But instead of the bite of steel, he heard Ember's piercing scream of rage, and saw a blur of obsidian scales launching itself through the air. The hatchling struck Ragnar in the chest with all the force its small body could muster, talons raking across the Jarl's mail shirt as it sought purchase. The impact wasn't enough to knock down the massive warrior, but it was sufficient to spoil his aim. The great sword buried itself in the snow beside Bjorn's head instead of splitting his skull. Ragnar roared and grabbed for the dragon with his free hand, but Ember was already moving, darting between the giant's legs like a deadly shadow. The hatchling's tail lashed out, its diamond-hard tip striking the back of Ragnar's knee with enough force to buckle the joint. As the Jarl stumbled, Bjorn rolled aside and reclaimed his axe. The exile surged to his feet, weapon ready, but what he saw next froze him in place with wonder and terror. one of Ragnar's warriors, overcome by greed and the desire to claim a dragon's hide for himself, had loosed an arrow at Ember. The shaft flew true, aimed at the hatchling's exposed flank as it dodged between the Jarl's legs. Without thought, without hesitation, Bjorn threw himself into the arrow's path. The barbed head punched through his leather vest and deep into his side, the impact spinning him around and sending him crashing to the blood-stained snow. The world seemed to stop. Ragnar froze mid-swing, his warriors stood transfixed, and even the wind itself seemed to hold its breath. In that moment of perfect silence, Ember's anguished cry split the morning air, not the simple call of an animal, but something far more profound and terrible. The sound rose in pitch and volume until it became a shriek that seemed to tear at the very fabric of reality. The dragon's scales blazed with inner fire, the crimson veins pulsing like a racing heartbeat, as power beyond mortal comprehension awakened within the small form. High overhead, so distant as to be nearly invisible, dark shapes appeared against the pale sky. At first, they seemed like storm clouds, but as they drew closer, their true nature became horrifyingly clear. Dragons, adult dragons, their massive forms blotting out the sun as they descended toward the valley, with wings spread wide enough to shadow entire villages. The lead dragon was enormous beyond imagination, its scales black as midnight, but shot through with veins of molten gold. Behind it came others, dragons of blue and green and bronze, their eyes blazing with an inner fire that spoke of intelligence older than human civilization. As one, the warriors of the Bloodaxe clan fell to their knees in the snow, their weapons forgotten as primal terror gripped their hearts. These were the children of Jormungandr, the spawn of the world serpent itself, and their presence in the mortal realm meant only one thing: someone had harmed what they protected. The great black dragon landed with earth-shaking force, its claws digging furrows in the frozen ground. When it opened its massive jaws, the roar that emerged was like the sound of mountains breaking, a sound that spoke of apocalypse and the ending of worlds. Bjorn, lying in the snow with the arrow still protruding from his side, could only watch in awe as Ember approached the massive creature with fearless steps. The hatchling was dwarfed by its elder, no larger than a mouse before a warhorse, yet there was no submission in its stance. The great dragon lowered its enormous head until it was level with Ember, and Exile swore he could see intelligence pass between them. Not mere animal communication, but something far more sophisticated. The adult dragon's golden eyes fixed on the arrow in Bjorn's side, then shifted to regard the human warriors who cowered in the snow. When the ancient creature spoke, its voice was like the rumble of avalanches, like the groaning of glaciers as they carved new valleys from solid stone. Yet somehow, impossibly, Bjorn understood the words. Who has harmed the hatchlings chosen? The question hung in the air, like a death sentence. None of Ragnar's warriors dared to speak, their courage broken utterly by the presence of beings from the oldest legend. The Jarl himself had fallen to his knees, his great sword lying forgotten in the snow beside him. It was Ember who answered, its young voice clear and musical even to human ears. The hatchling spoke in the ancient tongue of dragons, but again, Bjorn found he could understand every word. The golden-haired one saved me from the crushing wood. When the iron-tooth seekers came with death-bringers, he placed his flesh between their sharp flight and my scales. He is pack-brother, nest-defender, chosen kin. The great dragon's eyes blazed brighter, and when it looked upon the cowering humans, Bjorn could feel the weight of eons pressing down upon him. This was a creature that had seen the birth and death of kingdoms, that had witnessed the rise and fall of heroes, whose names were now forgotten even by the Scalds. Then let those who brought harm know the price of harming dragonkin, the ancient voice declared. What followed was not battle but annihilation. The adult dragons took to the sky with terrible purpose, their flames turning the pristine snow to steam and the very air to fire. The warriors of the Bloodaxe clan, men who had faced death in 100 battles, fled like children before a thunderstorm. Only Ragnar remained, his knees too weak to carry him, his mind shattered by the weight of supernatural terror. The great black dragon landed before him, its massive head lowering until the Jarl could feel the heat of its breath on his face. "You who leads the Harmbringers," the dragon spoke, its voice soft as silk and deadly as poison. "Know this, the exile is under our protection now. Should any of your kind seek to harm him or his dragonkin, we will come. We will find you, and we will burn your halls, your ships, your very names from the memory of the world." With that pronouncement, the great dragon spread its wings and took to the sky, followed by its kin. In moments, they were gone, leaving only the memory of their presence and the lingering scent of sulphur and flame. 5 years later, the trading post that had grown around the cave where Bjorn and Ember first found shelter bustled with activity. Merchants from across the known world came to trade with the dragon friend, as the exile had become known, seeking not just goods, but the protection that came with his legendary alliance. Bjorn stood on the wooden platform that overlooked the thriving settlement, his hand resting gently on Ember's neck. The dragon was no longer a hatchling. 5 years of growth had transformed the small creature into a magnificent beast, its obsidian scales gleaming like polished jet in the afternoon sun. The injured wing had healed perfectly, leaving Ember capable of flight that was the envy of the great eagles. Below them, children played in the shadow of friendly dragons who had come to visit their young kin. The fear that had once gripped the hearts of mortals at the sight of these legendary creatures had given way to wonder and respect. Under the protection of the dragon kin, no raider dared approach. No winter was too harsh to survive. "Strange how the fates work," Bjorn mused, his weathered fingers stroking the smooth scales beneath his palm. "Cast out in disgrace, I found a treasure beyond imagining." Ember's rumbling purr of agreement vibrated through both their bodies. The dragon had grown not just in size, but in wisdom, its golden eyes holding depths of knowledge that sometimes unsettled even its closest companion. Yet the bond between them remained as strong as it had been in that first moment when a desperate exile chose to save a trapped hatchling. A commotion at the settlement's edge drew Bjorn's attention. A small group of travelers approached, their banners bearing the red and black of the Bloodaxe clan. But these were not warriors. They came with open hands and peaceful intent, led by a young woman whose bearing marked her as nobility. "Dragon friend," the woman called out as she approached the platform, "I am Ingrid, daughter of Ragnar. I come seeking audience with you and your magnificent companion." Bjorn studied the young woman carefully. She had her father's strong jaw, but lacked the cruelty that had marked the old Jarl's features. Word had reached even this remote place that Ragnar had died the previous winter, his mind never recovering from his encounter with the adult dragons. The Bloodaxe clan had chosen new leadership, and apparently that leadership sought reconciliation. "Speak your peace, daughter of Ragnar," Bjorn replied, his voice carrying the authority of one who had found his true place in the world. "My father was wrong to exile you," Ingrid said, her words carrying the weight of formal acknowledgement. "The gold was found, hidden in the quarters of the man who accused you. We offer you restoration of honor, lands and title, if you will return to lead our warriors." Ember's head turned toward Bjorn, golden eyes reflecting curiosity about his response. For a moment, the exile considered the offer. To return in triumph, to reclaim the honor that had been stripped from him. It was everything he had once dreamed of during those dark days of banishment. But as he looked out over the thriving settlement, at the children playing safely under the protection of Dragonwing, at the traders who came seeking not just goods, but justice fairly dispensed, Bjorn realized he had found something far more valuable than honor or title. "I am honored by your offer, Ingrid Ragnar's daughter," he replied formally, "but I must decline. I have found my place in the world, and it is here, beside my dragon kin, protecting those who cannot protect themselves." The young Jarl nodded, as if she had expected this response. "Then perhaps we might speak of alliance instead of reunion. The northern reaches grow dangerous with new threats, and the wisdom of the dragon friend would be valuable counsel. As the negotiations began, Ember spread one massive wing to shade the gathering from the afternoon sun. The dragon's presence was no longer seen as a threat, but as a promise that justice would be protected, that the innocent would find sanctuary, and that some bonds transcended the petty politics of mortal kingdoms. In the end, Bjorn Ironwill had learned the most important truth of all. Sometimes losing everything is the only way to find what truly matters. And sometimes, in the act of saving another, we save ourselves. The legend of the dragon friend would be told around fires for generations to come, but the man himself was content to live quietly in the shadow of wings, surrounded by the family he had chosen and the loyalty he had earned. In the old tongue, there was a saying, "Never hurt what a dragon loves." For those wise enough to heed this warning, there was peace. For those who ignored it, there was only fire and ash carried on the northern wind. Thank you for joining us on this epic journey through the frozen lands of the north. If this tale of loyalty, redemption, and dragon fire stirred your warrior's heart, make sure you're subscribed to Viking Valhalla Stories for more legendary adventures. What did you think of Bjorn and Ember's bond? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to tell us where in the world you're watching from. We love connecting with our global tribe of Viking enthusiasts. Like this video if you want to see more stories of dragons, warriors, and the unbreakable bonds forged in the heat of battle. Your support keeps these ancient tales alive. Until next time, may your blade stay sharp and your shield stay strong.